The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council looked exactly like what you'd expect from a bunch of aliens who took themselves way too seriously. Crystalline pillars stretched up into a domed ceiling that sparkled with the light of 1,000 stars, while representatives from 47 different species sat in their specially designed comfort pods, all arranged in a perfect circle that screamed, "We're very important and diplomatic." At the center of this cosmic circus stood Chairman Vextar, a 7-foot-tall bird-like creature whose feathers shimmered with an obnoxious iridescent sheen. His beak was permanently curved in what could charitably be called a smirk, and his 4 eyes blinked in sequence like a malfunctioning traffic light. Right now, those eyes were focused on a holographic display showing various clips of humans doing incredibly human things, walking to work, standing in line at coffee shops, and having lengthy debates about where to go for dinner. As you can clearly observe, Vextar announced in a voice that sounded like he was perpetually explaining quantum physics to a particularly slow child, "The species known as humans demonstrates a profound lack of, how shall I put this delicately, speed." A collective murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrians clicked their mandibles knowingly, while the crystalline collective hummed in harmonic disapproval. Even the Blob Coalition managed to wobble judgmentally. Chief Evaluator Glum, a slug-like creature whose entire body was basically one giant eyeball with tentacles, slid forward on his trail of official mucus. His voice was the bureaucratic equivalent of watching paint dry. "Chairman Vextar, my analysis indicates that human pedestrian velocity averages a mere 1.4 meters per second. Their decision-making process regarding simple choices, such as meal selection, can extend up to 17 standard minutes. These beings are clearly operating on a timescale that would make a Torthan tree sloth appear hyperactive." The chamber erupted in what passed for alien laughter. The gaseous beings of Nebulon 7 made sounds like deflating balloons, while the silicon-based collective clinked like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Vextar raised one wing for silence, preening slightly at his own authority. "Indeed, Chief Evaluator Glum, however, in the interest of thoroughness and our commitment to fairness, I propose we conduct the Universal Reaction Protocol. A simple test, really. We shall measure their reflexes to confirm what we already know, that humans are quite frankly too slow to participate meaningfully in galactic civilization." Glum's eyeballs swiveled thoughtfully. "Sir, isn't that somewhat redundant? I mean, we've observed them taking 3 seconds to respond to their own communication devices when they're expecting the communication. What could they possibly achieve with our standardized reflex evaluation?" "Precisely the point, my gelatinous friend," Vextar replied, his beak clicking with satisfaction. "We shall demonstrate scientifically and irrefutably that these humans belong in the same category as the contemplative moss colonies of Serenity Prime. Slow, harmless, and utterly predictable." The council voted unanimously to proceed with the test. After all, what was the worst that could happen? They were dealing with a species that needed instructions on how to open food containers and regularly got lost in their own transportation systems. As the session concluded, Vextar allowed himself a moment of smugness. This would be the shortest evaluation in Galactic Council history. They'd run their little test, confirm human inadequacy, and be back to more important matters, like debating the proper taxation rates for interdimensional trade routes. If only they had bothered to ask why humans needed such quick reflexes on a planet where everything was supposedly trying to kill them. 3 days later, the humans arrived at testing facility Epsilon 7, and they were absolutely nothing like what the Galactic Council had expected. Well, actually, they were exactly what the Council had expected, which was the problem. Captain Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle with the casual confidence of someone who'd been in more dogfights than a professional pilot had any right to survive. His flight jacket was worn leather. His hair was perfectly messy in that way that suggested he'd been flying through atmosphere at Mach 3 just for kicks, and his grin was the kind that made enemies nervous and allies wonder what he was planning. "Well, would you look at that?" Jake drawled, surveying the gleaming test facility with the appreciation of someone examining a particularly interesting vintage car. "They actually built us a whole fancy setup. How thoughtful, Doctor." Elena Vasquez emerged next, adjusting her glasses with the precise movement of someone who'd spent years studying things that would make most people's brains hurt. She carried a tablet that was somehow running 17 different analysis programs simultaneously, and her expression suggested she'd already figured out something the aliens really didn't want her to know. "Fascinating architecture," she commented, her voice carrying that subtle tone professors use when they're about to explain why everyone else is wrong. "The structural design suggests they prioritize form over function. Interesting choice for a species that claims to value efficiency." The third human practically bounced off the shuttle ramp. Tommy Twitch Patterson looked like he'd been mainlining energy drinks since birth, his eyes darting around the facility with the rapid-fire assessment of someone who'd logged more virtual combat hours than most soldiers saw real action. His fingers twitched constantly, as if he was still holding invisible game controllers. Okay, this is actually pretty cool. Tommy said, talking at roughly twice the speed of normal human conversation. Very retro sci-fi aesthetic, like they're going for that whole imposing alien technologies vibe, but honestly, the texture mapping on those walls is kinda basic. My gaming rig could render something way more impressive. Vexter approached the trio with the measured dignity of someone who was absolutely certain he was about to prove a point. His feathers were perfectly preened, and his 4 eyes blinked in their usual sequence as he prepared to deliver what he clearly considered a masterpiece of condescending diplomacy. "Greetings, human specimens," he began, his voice dripping with the kind of fake politeness that made customer service representatives everywhere weep with recognition. "I am Chairman Vexter, and I shall be overseeing your evaluation today. I trust you understand the significance of these proceedings." Jake glanced at Elena, who glanced at Tommy, who was already pulling up some kind of analysis app on his personal device. The look they shared was the kind that passed between people who'd worked together long enough to communicate entire conversations with a single raised eyebrow. "Oh, we understand perfectly," Elena replied, her tone suggesting she understood several things that Vexter definitely didn't want her to understand. "You're testing our reaction times to determine our suitability for galactic civilization. Standard xenobiological evaluation protocol. Very thorough of you." Chief Evaluator Glum oozed forward, leaving his customary trail of official mucus. "Indeed. Our equipment represents the pinnacle of galactic testing technology. We have evaluated over 3,000 species using these precise instruments. The test is quite simple, really. You will observe a light stimulus and respond as quickly as possible. We expect this will take approximately 2 to 3 seconds for your species." Tommy snorted with laughter, then tried to cover it with a cough. Sorry, just 2 to 3 seconds. For a light? That's like, wow, that's really." He looked at his companions helplessly. "Should I tell them, or do you want to?" "Let's see what happens," Jake said, his grin widening. "This should be educational." Vexter's beak curved into what he probably thought was a reassuring smile but looked more like a predator trying to appear friendly. "Excellent. I do so appreciate enthusiasm, even if it is misplaced. Shall we begin with the preliminary calibration?" As the aliens bustled around their sophisticated equipment, the 3 humans stood in a loose circle, their body language suggesting they were sharing some kind of private joke that the rest of the galaxy wasn't in on yet. They were about to be. The testing chamber looked like someone had crossed a medical examination room with a game show set, then painted everything in shades of "we take ourselves very seriously." Banks of monitoring equipment lined the walls, humming with the self-important buzz of technology that was probably impressive if you'd never seen a smartphone. Glum positioned himself behind the primary control console, his eyeballs swiveling between various displays with the focused intensity of someone who'd spent his entire career making sure tests were administered with proper bureaucratic precision. "Subject designation Human 1, please position yourself at the response station." Jake sauntered over to what looked like a podium with a single large button on top. The button was roughly the size of a dinner plate, and glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed gently, as if it was trying very hard to be noticed. "Okay, so I just hit this thing when I see the light?" Jake asked, resting his hand casually next to the button. "Pretty straightforward." "Precisely," Vextar announced, positioning himself where he could observe both the human and the readouts simultaneously. "When the stimulus light activates, you will press the response button as quickly as your physiology allows. The average response time across all galactic species is 2.7 seconds, with our fastest recorded time being 1.9 seconds, achieved by the hyperkinetic hummingbirds of Velocity Prime." Tommy whistled appreciatively. "Wow, 1.9 seconds. That's almost fast enough to dodge a falling rock." Elena was studying the monitoring equipment with the kind of attention that made the alien technicians nervous. "Interesting calibration. Your sensors are optimized for measuring responses in the multi-second range. Very comprehensive." "Indeed," Glum said, his voice swelling with pride. "We spare no expense in our evaluations. Beginning test sequence, in 3, 2, 1. A bright yellow light flashed on the wall directly in front of Jake. The response button clicked. Every piece of monitoring equipment in the room started screaming. Alarms blared, readouts flashed error messages, and at least 3 different sensors began smoking slightly. The main display showed a number that made absolutely no sense, 0.18 seconds. "Equipment malfunction," Glum announced immediately, his eyeball spinning in what might have been panic. "The timing sensors have clearly experienced a critical failure. No biological entity can achieve a response time of 0.18 seconds. It's physically impossible." "Well, that's embarrassing," Jake said, still standing casually next to the button. "Maybe you should try recalibrating." Vextar's feathers were beginning to ruffle in agitation. "Yes, absolutely. Chief Evaluator Glum, Please reset the equipment. We cannot have faulty readings compromising the integrity of our evaluation. For the next 15 minutes, the aliens fussed over their machinery with the desperate intensity of people who just discovered their supposedly foolproof system had a very big, very obvious fool in it. They recalibrated sensors, replaced components, and ran diagnostic after diagnostic, all while the humans waited with the patient amusement of people watching someone try to fix a television by hitting it with a hammer. Equipment restored to optimal functionality, Glum finally announced. All sensors now triple verified and cross-referenced. Let us proceed with the corrected test. The light flashed again. The button clicked again. The equipment had another nervous breakdown. This time the readout showed 0.16 seconds. That's not possible, Vexstar whispered, his voice carrying the tone of someone whose entire worldview had just been drop-kicked into a black hole. The neural impulse transmission alone should require at least 0.5 seconds. The visual processing, the decision-making, the motor response, it's biologically impossible. Elena cleared her throat delicately. Actually, if I may point out a small technical detail, your equipment appears to be functioning perfectly. The issue might be with your baseline assumptions about human physiology. Impossible, Glum declared, though his eyeball was darting nervously between the humans and his precious readouts. We have studied your species extensively. Your reaction times should be. What? Tommy asked, bouncing slightly on his feet. I mean, can I try next? This looks fun. Before anyone could object, Tommy had bounded over to the response station, his fingers already twitching in anticipation. Okay, hit me with your best shot, but maybe warn me first, because I've been playing reaction-based games since I was like 5, and I might accidentally break something. The light flashed. The button was pressed so fast that several aliens weren't sure they'd actually seen it happen. The equipment didn't just malfunction this time, it gave up entirely. The main display showed 0.12 seconds before going completely blank, accompanied by a sound that strongly suggested expensive components were quietly having existential crises. Oh come on, Tommy said, looking genuinely disappointed. I wasn't even trying that hard. Is this thing supposed to be some kind of challenge, or are we just testing whether humans can see light? In the stunned silence that followed, the only sound was the gentle hum of alien technology slowly coming to terms with the fact that everything it thought it knew about biology was apparently wrong. Very, very wrong. The silence stretched on for exactly 3.7 seconds, which was ironically longer than most galactic species could manage a simple light response. Vexstar's 4 eyes were blinking in complete asynchronization, his carefully maintained composure cracking like cheap paint in a hurricane. Bring in the advanced response array, he commanded, his voice carrying the slightly hysterical edge of someone who just watched their PhD thesis get debunked by a particularly clever hamster. Sir, Glum ventured, his eyeball swiveling nervously, perhaps we should consider that these readings might be accurate. Absolutely not, Vexstar snapped, his feathers now actively bristling. No species in the known galaxy has reaction times below 0.5 seconds. It's biologically impossible. These humans are clearly some kind of mechanical constructs. Yes, that must be it. They're artificial beings designed to mimic organic life. Jake let out a snort of laughter. Buddy, if I was a robot, don't you think I'd have been built with better hair? 3 technicians rolled in what looked like the alien equivalent of a gaming setup crossed with a medical scanner. Multiple screens displayed complex patterns. Lights flashed from 17 different directions, and there were enough sensors to make a paranoid android jealous. This is our multi-stimulus cognitive response evaluator, Glum announced with the pride of someone showing off their prized collection of tax forms. It tests not just reaction time, but pattern recognition, spatial awareness and decision-making under pressure. The record holder is Grand Master Zephyr of the Crystalline Collective, with an average response time of 1.3 seconds across all variables. Tommy's eyes lit up like a kid who just discovered a new gaming console. Oh, now we're talking. This actually looks like it might be fun. What's the high score? The high score? Vexstar repeated, as if Tommy had just asked about the mating habits of theoretical mathematics. Yeah, you know, the best time anyone's ever gotten. The record to beat. The achievement to unlock. Tommy was already bouncing on his toes, his fingers doing that constant twitching thing that made it look like he was playing an invisible piano. Come on, this is basically just a really expensive arcade game, right? Elena stepped closer to examine the equipment, her scientific curiosity clearly overriding any sense of diplomatic caution. Interesting design. Multiple simultaneous inputs, pattern recognition requirements, spatial reasoning components. It's almost like someone designed this specifically to test the kinds of skills humans develop from, oh I don't know, surviving on a planet where everything is constantly trying to kill you. Nothing on Earth is constantly trying to kill humans, Vexstar protested, though his voice suggested he was beginning to suspect otherwise. Really? Elena's eyebrows rose with the kind of polite skepticism that scientists use when they're about to ruin someone's entire day. Let me think. Bears, sharks, venomous snakes, poisonous spiders, aggressive insects, predatory cats, pack hunters, disease-carrying parasites, natural disasters, unstable weather patterns, toxic plants. She paused thoughtfully. Should I continue? Because I've got about 3 hours worth of material here. While Elena was casually destroying the aliens' understanding of Earth as a peaceful paradise, Tommy had already positioned himself at the testing station. The advanced response array hummed to life, and suddenly the chamber was filled with flashing lights, moving patterns, and audio cues that sounded like a techno concert having a fight with a construction site. Okay, this is more like it, Tommy said, his voice taking on the focused intensity of someone entering what gamers call the zone. Multi-directional input streams, pattern recognition matrices, spatial awareness challenges, audio-visual synchronization requirements. This is basically just a really expensive version of that reflex training game I play to warm up for tournaments. The test began. What happened next was less like watching a cognitive evaluation, and more like watching someone casually demonstrate that the laws of physics were more like gentle suggestions. Tommy's hands moved in patterns that seemed to predict where the next stimulus would appear before it actually did. His responses weren't just fast, they were preemptive. He was hitting buttons before the corresponding lights fully activated, recognizing patterns before they completed, and somehow managing to look bored while doing it. The readouts were climbing steadily. 0.09 seconds average response time, 100% accuracy, on pattern recognition, perfect spatial reasoning scores, and reaction times that were making the monitoring equipment question its fundamental understanding of causality. How is he doing that? Whispered one of the technicians, his voice carrying the tone of someone watching a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat, except the rabbit was actually a small dragon and the hat was somehow bigger on the inside. Practice, Jake said simply, watching Tommy work with the casual pride of someone who'd seen this performance before. Kid's been playing reflex-based games since he could hold a controller. Started with simple stuff, worked his way up to games that require response times measured in milliseconds. This is basically Tuesday for him. Elena was studying the readouts with the focused attention of someone who'd just discovered a new species of mathematics. Fascinating. The pattern recognition component is particularly interesting. Tommy's not just responding to current stimuli, he's predicting future patterns based on algorithmic analysis. His brain is essentially running probability calculations in real time. That's not possible. Glum managed, his eyeballs spinning so fast it was making him dizzy. Biological neural networks can't process information at that speed. The synaptic transmission delays alone. Oh, about that, Elena said, her voice carrying that particular tone scientists use when they're about to drop a knowledge bomb that's going to leave a crater in someone's worldview. Human neural networks are actually quite remarkable. We've evolved what you might call shortcuts in our processing systems. Reflexive responses that bypass conscious thought entirely. It's very efficient when you're dealing with immediate survival situations. The test concluded with a sound that was part completion chime, part electronic sob of defeat. Tommy's final score was displayed on the main screen. 0.08 seconds average response time, 100% accuracy, across all parameters, and a performance rating that the system could only express as E or. Score exceeds maximum possible values. Well, that was fun, Tommy said, cracking his knuckles with satisfaction. Though honestly, the pattern algorithms were pretty basic. I've played mobile games with more complex recognition requirements. You guys should really consider upgrading your software. Vexstar was staring at the readouts with the expression of someone who'd just watched their entire belief system get folded into a paper airplane and thrown out the window. This cannot be representative of your species. Surely this individual is some kind of enhanced specimen. Actually, Elena said, consulting her tablet with the casual efficiency of someone who'd been expecting this exact question. Tommy's reaction times are well within normal human parameters. In fact, he's probably around the 70th percentile for his age group. We've got professional athletes, fighter pilots and competitive gamers who regularly test significantly faster. There are humans, faster than this. Glum's voice was barely above a whisper. Oh, absolutely, Jake confirmed cheerfully. Tommy's good, but he's not even close to the fastest. We've got people who can react to stimuli in under 0.05 seconds. Course most of them are too busy doing important stuff to come to these kinds of meetings. The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded either enlightenment or complete psychological breakdown. In this case, it was looking like a toss-up. I think, Vexstar said slowly, his voice carrying the careful cadence of someone who was trying very hard not to have a complete mental collapse. We may need to reconsider our evaluation criteria. Yeah, Elena agreed, her tone suggesting she was being remarkably patient with a group of very slow students. You probably should, because if you think our reaction times are impressive, wait until you see what happens when we actually try. That was when the real panic began. The panic manifested in different ways depending on the species. The crystalline collective started harmonizing in what sounded like a funeral dirge, while the gaseous beings of Nebulon 7 began rapidly expanding and contracting in what was either their version of hyperventilation or possibly just Tuesday for them. The Zephyrians had gone completely silent, which was deeply unsettling since they were normally about as quiet as a jackhammer convention. Vexstar meanwhile was pacing back and forth with the kind of manic energy that suggested his carefully constructed worldview was currently doing backflips off a tall building. His feathers were now actively disheveled, and his 4 eyes were blinking in patterns that seemed to spell out "help me" in some kind of avian Morse code. This is impossible, he kept repeating, his voice climbing steadily toward hysteria. Reaction times of 0.08 seconds. Pattern recognition that exceeds our most advanced computational systems. Spatial awareness that borders on precognition. These readings suggest that humans are, he paused, apparently unable to voice the terrible conclusion his brain was reaching. Are what? Elena asked, her tone carrying the patient interest of someone who already knew the answer but wanted to hear it said out loud. Our apex predators, Vexstar whispered, the words falling from his beak like stones into still water. Well, duh, Tommy said, looking genuinely confused by the alien's distress. I mean, have you seen our movies? We literally make entertainment out of watching people hunt other people. For fun, we call it action cinema, and it's like half our cultural output. Elena stepped forward, her scientist instincts taking over as she recognized a teachable moment. Actually, this is a fascinating opportunity for cross-species education. You see, Chairman Vexstar, your evaluation protocols are based on the assumption that intelligence and reaction speed are inversely related. The smarter a species, the slower their reflexes, because they need time to process complex information. That's correct. Glum managed, his eyeball swiveling to track Elena's movements with the desperate attention of someone hoping for a lifeline. Higher cognitive function requires more neural processing time. It's basic xenobiology. Basic xenobiology for herbivores. Elena corrected gently. You see, that relationship only holds true for species that evolved in environments where immediate physical threats were rare. Species that could afford to spend time thinking about problems because nothing was actively trying to eat them while they thought. She gestured to her tablet, which was now displaying what looked like a complex evolutionary tree. Humans evolved on a planet where hesitation meant death. We didn't have the luxury of careful deliberation when a saber-toothed cat was charging at us, or when we needed to track prey animals across vast distances. We developed what you might call combat intelligence minius, the ability to think quickly, react instantly, and make life or death decisions in fractions of a second. But Vexstar's voice trailed off as the implications hit him. Impossible. Elena's smile was the kind that professors wore when they were about to demolish a student's entire thesis. Let me put this in perspective for you. The average human reaction time of 0.2 seconds represents the time it takes for visual information to travel from the eye to the brain, be processed, and trigger a motor response. But that's just our average casual performance. When we're actually trying, when we're in what we call fight or flight mode, our reaction times can drop to 0.05 seconds or less. She paused to let that sink in before continuing. Now, I've been studying your species biology while we've been here, and I've made some interesting discoveries. Chairman Vexstar, what would you say your personal reaction time is? Approximately 2.3 seconds for simple stimuli, he admitted reluctantly. And Chief Evaluator Glum, 2.8 seconds, though I pride myself on accuracy over speed. Glum replied, his eyeball drooping slightly. Elena nodded sympathetically, which is perfectly reasonable for species that evolved in low-threat environments. But here's the thing that I think you're beginning to understand. Those aren't just slow reaction times by human standards. They're what we would consider comatose. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of several alien civilizations simultaneously having existential crises. You want to know what's really interesting? Elena continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone who was clearly enjoying herself. I've been running calculations on the average reaction times of all the species in your Galactic Council. The fastest, according to your records, was 1.9 seconds. The slowest was 4.7 seconds. Do you know what we call a human with a 4.7-second reaction time? What? Vexstar whispered. Dead, Jake said simply. We call them dead, because they wouldn't last 5 minutes on Earth. Elena pulled up another display on her tablet. This is a comparative analysis I've been working on. Your entire galactic civilization is essentially composed of what humans would classify as prey species. You're all herbivores, filter feeders, or decomposers. Species that evolved in environments where the biggest threat was running out of food, or maybe getting stepped on by something larger. That's not entirely accurate. Glum protested weakly. The crystalline collective are technically carnivores. They absorb nutrients from deceased organic matter. Elena corrected. That's not carnivory, that's decomposition. There's a significant difference between eating something that's already dead and killing something that's very much alive and fighting back. Tommy, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly perked up. Oh dude, are you telling me that we're like the first actual predator species they've ever met? That's kind of awesome. No wonder their reaction times are so slow, they've never had to dodge anything faster than a falling leaf. It's worse than that, Elena said, her smile taking on a slightly predatory edge that made several aliens instinctively back away. Based on my analysis, humans aren't just predators, we're persistence hunters. We're the species that evolved to chase prey animals until they literally died of exhaustion. We don't just kill quickly, we're designed to outlast, outlive, and outlast everything else on our planet. She gestured to Jake and Tommy. These two represent fairly typical human specimens. Jake is a fighter pilot, which means he's trained to operate vehicles at speeds that would liquefy most of your species, while making split-second decisions that determine life or death for himself and others. Tommy is a competitive gamer, which means he's spent thousands of hours training his reflexes to respond to threats measured in milliseconds. And they're not even our specialists, Jake added cheerfully. We've got people whose entire job is to be faster, stronger, and more dangerous than us. We call them special forces, and they're basically what happens when you take a human and then train them to be better at being human. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Vexstar's legs giving out. He collapsed into his chair with the expression of someone who'd just realized they'd been playing chess with a computer that had been pretending to be a pocket calculator. So when you applied for membership in our Galactic Council, Glum said slowly, his voice carrying the tone of someone working through a particularly horrifying math problem. You weren't actually asking permission to join galactic civilization. Oh no, Elena said, her tone bright and cheerful. We've been part of galactic civilization for decades. We've explored most of the local systems, established trade relationships with 17 different species, and set up research stations in 12 different star systems. We just thought it would be polite to make it official. But if you're so much faster than us, Vexstar asked weakly, why haven't you simply taken over? The three humans exchanged glances, and for a moment their expressions were identical, the patient, slightly amused look of apex predators who had just been asked why they hadn't eaten the zookeeper. Because Elena said gently, we're not actually monsters, we're just humans. And humans, despite being terrifyingly efficient predators, are also social creatures who prefer cooperation to conquest. Usually. The word usually hung in the air like a sword suspended by a very thin thread. Besides, Tommy added, taking over would be boring. We like having friends. It's more fun than having subjects. Though, Jake said thoughtfully, if someone were to say threaten Earth or start a war with humanity, well, that might change things. The aliens looked at each other, then at the humans, then at the test results that had just redefined their understanding of what was possible in the universe. So, Vexstar said carefully, when you say you prefer cooperation, we mean it, Elena assured him. Humans are remarkably peaceful for apex predators. We've only had a few thousand wars in our recorded history, and most of those were with each other. We're practically pacifists. The fact that she said this with complete sincerity was possibly the most terrifying thing the aliens had heard all day. The silence stretched for 4.2 seconds, which was roughly twice as long as it would have taken any of the humans to identify and neutralize a threat. Not that anyone was counting. Except Elena, who was definitely counting. Dr. Vasquez, Vexstar said carefully. When you say a few thousand wars, could you elaborate? Elena consulted her tablet casually. Conservative estimates put it around 14,000 documented wars in the last 5,000 years of recorded history. 14,000, Glum repeated faintly. In 5,000 years. That's almost 3 wars per year. One of the crystalline collective representatives chimed in, their voice carrying barely controlled panic. Most of them were pretty small, Tommy said, genuinely surprised by their reaction. Village disputes, trade routes, religious disagreements about invisible sky people. We've also had wars over sports, politics, territory, ideology, and at least one conflict that started because someone insulted someone else's hat. Elena added helpfully. The aliens stared in horror. But these were all wars between humans. She continued brightly. We've never had a war with an alien species, mostly because we've never met any that could fight back effectively. Could fight back effectively, Vextar whispered. Well, no offense, Elena said, but with reaction times measured in seconds rather than milliseconds, most galactic species would be essentially helpless in actual conflict. It would be less like warfare and more like humans trying to fight a natural disaster. So, Vextar said carefully, you're apex predators with impossible reaction times. You've established a galactic presence, and you're capable of sustained warfare on an incomprehensible scale. That's accurate, Elena confirmed. Though you're leaving out the part where we're really good at making friends and genuinely enjoy cultural exchange. And pizza, Tommy added. We're definitely introducing you to pizza. The thing is, Jake said conversationally, we didn't come here to join your galactic civilization. We came here to invite you to join ours. The implications hit the aliens like a freight train made of existential dread. Human expansion has been proceeding nicely, Elena continued. We've established colonies in 47 star systems, research stations in over 100 locations, and trade relationships with 63 different species. 63 species. Glum's voice was barely audible. Most are quite friendly once you get past the initial "oh god, the humans are here's" phase, Elena said. We've been introducing ourselves gradually, allowing each species to adjust at their own pace, cultural sensitivity and all that. So when you applied for council membership, Vextar said slowly, you weren't asking permission, you were offering to let us join yours. We prefer to think of it as proposing a merger of equals, Elena said. You have established trade networks and cultural diversity. We have advanced technology, exploration capabilities, and the ability to defend galactic civilization if something nasty shows up. What kind of nasty things? Vextar asked, though his tone suggested he didn't want to know. Rogue AI, hostile invasions, cosmic disasters, interdimensional incursions, the usual stuff, Jake said casually. The galaxy's big, and not everything out there is as friendly as we are. The casual way he said "as friendly as we are," while discussing interdimensional threats, was possibly the most terrifying thing they'd heard all day. So you're offering to protect us from threats we didn't know existed. In exchange for what? Friendship, Elena said simply. Cultural exchange. Trade partnerships. Scientific collaboration. And pizza, Tommy added. The silence was broken by Vextar's decision-making process reaching a conclusion. I believe the Galactic Council would be delighted to approve humanity's membership, with full honors. Immediately. Awesome, Jake said grinning. Though we've technically been members for 6 months, we just thought it would be polite to make it official. You've been watching our meetings. Vextar's voice climbed toward hysteria. Just the public ones, Elena assured him. We respect privacy. Besides, we figured we'd wait until we were official members before attending the closed sessions. Well, Vextar said finally, I suppose we should schedule a formal integration ceremony, and perhaps discuss adjustments to our defense protocols. Sounds good, Jake said, heading toward the exit. Though honestly you don't need to worry about defense, we've got that covered. As the humans walked away, Elena paused. Oh, one more thing. You might want to update your xenobiology textbooks. That whole intelligence and reaction speed are inversely related thing. That's only true for prey species. Predators evolved to be fast and smart, because anything else got you killed. We'll make a note, Vextar said weakly. Great. Oh, and warn the other council members that humans are coming to the next session. We have some ideas about improving galactic efficiency. What kind of ideas? Glum asked fearfully. Just suggestions about streamlining bureaucracy, optimizing resources, and establishing basic defense protocols, Elena said casually. Nothing too dramatic, we're not trying to take over after all. The casual way she said we're not trying to take over while discussing complete restructuring of galactic civilization was the perfect capstone to an already educational day. As the humans disappeared, Vextar turned to Glum with the expression of someone who just survived a natural disaster. Chief Evaluator, I believe we may need to revise our evaluation criteria. Should I start with the assumption that everything we thought we knew about biology is wrong? Glum asked. That seems like a reasonable place to start. Outside, the humans were already discussing their next meeting, their voices carrying the casual confidence of people who had just politely informed an entire galactic civilization that the universe was about to become a much more interesting place. And somewhere in the facility's computer systems, the advanced response array was still trying to process Tommy's test results, occasionally emitting small electronic sounds that strongly suggested it was having an existential crisis and would probably need therapy.